What's up, everyone? This is Karak with ACG, and these are the continuing voyages of a YouTuber whose ongoing mission is to find you unique games and to give you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or complete bullshit. Engage. Today I'm taking a look at the MMO Star Trek Online from Cryptic Studios and Perfect World. Star Trek Online comes to the console after a long drawn-out voyage on the PC, carrying with it a new lighting engine, mission improvements, and controller-based gameplay. So let's see if Star Trek Online for the consoles is coming at us with the Picard edition, meandering and weepy, crying itself to sleep on a pile of bad decisions, and sadly following in the footsteps of its competitors. Or is it the Kirk edition, flinging a big middle finger to the mediocrity of many free-to-play MMOs everywhere, while simultaneously challenging gamers to bombastic space battles, and like an ungirdled William Shatner, just putting it all out there for everyone to see. So here's the review for Star Trek Online Console Edition. You just got your Picard My Kirk, the world's closest chase view, and Star Trek MTV Cribs Edition. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. Graphics start first. So I have to say, after the questionable affair that's the main city in Neverwinter on the consoles, I wasn't entirely sure that Cryptic was bringing their A game to the table here. But we do know that the folks there were pushing a new set of systems, including an advanced series of lighting changes to the console, and surprisingly at times, the game actually looks pretty spectacular. Now, if you can't believe I'm saying that, well, either could I at first. Like when you're exploring just you and your merry crew and you enter nebulae that ripple with all kinds of lighting effects and status-changing energies that actually for the first time look fully 3D and, actually present themselves. Unlike the original lighting in the PC version, which always seemed to be lacking any kind of true depth. Or when you descend down into the bowels of some questionably built space stations as your away team splatter special effects moves all over the area every time you enter a room, just in case an enemy's waiting inside. And really, when the going gets tough and the tough turn into Kirk, it's time to blow some shit up. And just like the PC version, that's when the game does its most to remind you that Star Trek might be known as the wise elder statesman of sci-fi until J.J. Abrams lens flared the bridge to all shit, but this thing actually looks really good in combat. For example, climbing away from the crackling, burning debris of a Klingon warbird, laughing that they ever thought they could take you on, only to have your shit straight up frozen in place by come over here beams like a futuristic version of Mortal Kombat Scorpion stole someone's captain's chair. See, that's where it's at its strongest. The particle effects and special lighting do a good deal to lend a physicality to things that in the past on the PC version just looked like light. That's what a new illumination system's going to do for you folks, and in some places it does wonders. Now, ship designs continue to excel, and the ability to customize them as you go in their number and coloring means that while some may look somewhat the same, as you grow in power and also get more and more options to graphically differentiate yourself, you're going to stop looking like Captain Picard number 444 and look like Captain Karak number, 1. As a package, it's not 7 and 9 levels of hotness, because what is, but it's more like Dax on Deep Space Nine. Sort of awesome, but you're always worried something is off and it's going to fall apart. Because while it does have the new Global Light Probe illumination and the HDR lighting improvements that add a good deal of depth and scale that's not represented in the PC version at this time, that doesn't mean everyone gets teleported without the occasional, whoops, sorry, your ass is now on your face moments. For example, sometimes the lighting just turned completely off. That's right, some areas the lighting was working fine and then boom, it's sexy time. Now, logging out and then logging back in restored it back, but that's all kinds of odd. Also, some areas look spectacularly dark, and if it was deep space, that would be fine, but instead, sometimes it was in a particular corner of a hallway or some other area that should have been practically bathing in light. Additionally, the game runs at 30 FPS sometimes, but the sometimes isn't when you would expect. See, I did battle with a legion of Klingons, all gleefully light my ship up like a Death Star version of a Christmas tree, inside of a nebula, while I was fingering special powers as quickly as I possibly could, and the frame rate was fine. But then I dropped into the planet-to-planet flight, and I would occasionally get hitches and hiccups just flying alone through space looking at nothing. Worse still is the ground combat, and while not as bad as Stuttertown and Neverwinter, it can get a bit uncomfortable in those busier areas. Also, sometimes people just occasionally lose their flesh, especially when loading in, which can leave you seeing the anatomical view of some bartender's face prior to the rest of his skin realizing, oh, I should probably show up. It's disconcerting, but if you've ever played the original Mass Effect, you're probably immune to that stuff anyway. That being said, this is a game that really does, for the most part, look wonderful for an MMO on a console, which is a tall order. And I think that has to be remembered, sort of like my waistband during a holiday. MMOs have to scale. They have to be able to present a graphical presentation at any number of people playing, adjusting for that player load. And here, what happens is, for the most part, you're getting to enjoy a damn sweet-looking space-fighting, shields-raising, sending away teams to invade your enemies like the Zika virus strategic space game. It's just that sometimes it thinks it's Neverwinter for a second. Sound, music, and voice.
Nice shot. 2 more jamming satellites left.
And of course, sound is at first. And yeah, it's still pretty awkward. For example, footsteps still sound like someone slapping Campbell's food cans into the side of a car. It's tinny and hollow, and many times it just sounds completely out of place, as your footsteps echo all over the location, but something like a laser blast or explosion might not. I've always had a love-hate relationship for Star Trek Online's sound. Everything in the space sections usually sound awesome, with deep booming concussive blasts from various types of tornado hits, or the crackling of expelling energy from your ship's belly as it begins to just finally fly apart. But that moment you get on the ground, everything goes wrong, and it starts to sound like they hired some kid to sit in the back just yelling boom, 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 boom into a microphone, which could be fun, but it actually doesn't sound like fun. I would say for the most part, though, there's a lot of canon here. It's good sounds, but below average sound processing. And of course, that brings us to music. Now, this is really well done, and by the supremely talented Kevin Manthe. From the tribal chasing percussion moments of the Klingon tracks that really remind you of the awesomeness of General Chang, to the horn and gorn, and almost too much to take over-the-top horn and raging singing vocal combination that make up the Gorn's main theme. You know, Star Trek's never shied away from experimentation in their music or their instrument choice, and that's always meant amazingly detailed and really eclectic percussive moments, like someone fell into the drum section of the local music store, but they had really good timing and wanted it all to sound like it was on purpose. Or even the surprising hard rock inspired Undane track that, unlike most anything you would think to hear in the Trek universe, somehow it's got a couple inspired fades into string sections, and later on it all sounds ultimately familiar. At many times overly orchestral. I think it's always best to remember that that's sort of what they're aiming for, which means thick string sections and lots of hero horn moments. Now, it may be a lot of things, but it's not nuanced. In fact, it's about as nuanced as a Kirk versus Spock in a battle to the death, at even its most tepid and slow moments. And I think I'm cool with that. It's not for everyone, and it's certainly not for listening to while you're trying to go to sleep at night, but I liked it. Voice. So good and yet so friggin' unfulfilling. While people from the various different shows have come and done some voiceovers for their characters, and we hear a number of overflows from local talent from the games like DC Online, in the end, Star Trek shows its age with a stunning amount of bland voiceover and text with no voice. For every Quark, there's 100 unvoiced NPCs and 5 you wish were unvoiced. Also, man, I don't know if Cryptic shorted these people's paychecks and they found out early, but goddamn, some of them sound like they fell face first into a fucking bucket of ketamine, delivering lines like they're in the midst of the world's longest yawn. Even your commanders sound like they're reading a prescription side effects warning list versus sending you to your death with nothing but a battleship and untested raw recruits. None of them are bad, but honestly, even the good ones are just pretty average. Gameplay. As we look at this, any MMO to do well needs to do various things with success, but the most important is to have a series of moments of accomplishment that can be both event-driven, but also ultimately repeatable as long as possible, as story-driven content can never equal any player's desire to extract it. Star Trek Online attempts to do this with 11 seasons of content and 2 expansions all right at the start, which is a good amount for a free-to-play MMO. So you basically start out as a character from a various list of races all fitting under Romulan, Klingon, or Federation control. Each gives you a small bonus of some kind, but it's nothing earth-shattering, so don't worry about that. Depending on your choice, you have a very robust character editor as well, and it is, and I checked this to be sure, capable of both absolute beauty and Frankenstein wonders that even mothers would smother, so watch out for that. Now, once you've sculpted your version of the galaxy's perfect-looking starship captain, you're thrown into the world's most boring tutorial as you walk from person to person at an academy in a straight line as they deliver little snippets of organized information. It's terrible. Once you finally get to the point where you're going to be on a ship, you're going to know how to move, aim, talk to others, and have a basic understanding of the inventory, which is good. How you jump from being no one to a starship captain is sort of like the recent movies. You see, the games need to have a reason that everyone and their 4 neighbors all were given starships right out of the academy. So a battle ensues, and at the end, boom, you got a starship. Think of it sort of like a medical student seeing one of their doctors drunk, so someone up and just gives them a hospital. It makes absolute crap for sense, but it sure does get you from point A to point B very, very fast, and you're pretty much off. As a captain, you can do a number of things, most branching out from the main storyline from the start and widening thereon. And the 2 main actions, space combat and ground combat, include a robust PvP for those wanting to polish up their skills on lesser talented captains. Space combat sees you taking your outfitted ships into enemy armadas and using the skills that you hone as well as those that you train underneath you, and your combined equipment to take out the enemy. While you progress and learn skills and specialties and get expertise in many ways, it's your crew that is the real backbone here. And unlike any MMO I can think of in the past, I can't really think of the last time that a crew, NPCs, hirelings, or cannon fodder, whatever you're going to call them, has mattered this much. Now, taking spots in engineering, tactics, tactical and space stations, they have their own starting skills, plus those that they learn or are trained on later as they level up. Now, these are all going to become paramount to how you take your flying death frisbee into battle anyway, and what strategies you use to basically end the lives of your enemy one little bit of space debris at a time. For example, outfit your tactical officer with beam-based special attacks and buffers, and you're going to find yourself dealing far more powerful beam attacks, while still not being completely useless with the other types of weapons. One of the things I like so much about Star Trek Online is that there are so many hundreds of combinations just in ship types, weapon setups, and officer types. For example, ignoring the Tasha Yars of the Star Trek universe for a second, you also have science and engineering bridge crew, with a bevy of unique skills like the ability to send out away teams to fuck up enemy ships from the inside, or the ability to suck out enemy shield power from afar. It's far less Scotty and far more Spock, going out and actually, doing shit. Add it all together and you have this sprawling, really integrated system, which is sort of ship, captain skills, crew skills, equipment. Even if 5 people, let's say, had the same vessels and the same starting crew and starting skills, within just a small amount of time, that's going to begin to differentiate unless you go for a like-for-like build, which even then begins to widen as different types of weapons and systems begin to be introduced, like tachyon beams versus phasers or quantum torpedoes versus ones just made of cold, hard steel, and those are all random drops. If there's one thing that Star Trek does right, it's the feeling of openness in the use of those systems. For example, facing is a matter of life or death here, and you have the ability to transfer energy to shields, side shields, and so forth, also auxiliary, movement, or weapons. And while most would just say weapons or shields is where they want to go, the fact is, a shield may not recover as fast as you could just turn the ship so that the enemy's weapons hit a fully protected area. It's this multi-layered rock, paper, scissors utilizing the skills and equipment and your decisions in mid-combat that is really so telling and so fun for a lot of players. Now, players themselves are going to go up in ranks all the way to the upper echelon admirals, and each new tier unlocking another set of ship builds, new skills you can train your bridge crew with, the ability to promote them, traits you can use both in space and on the ground, and a variety of other direct options like the authority to join patrols as an official representative of whatever alliance you're in, as well as join fleets, do random event battles, and just other activities. Unfortunately, not everything's perfect, because at some point you're going to beam down somewhere, and I can't lie, where Star Trek is really absolutely great in space, it's really absolutely not on the ground. While controls have been somewhat revamped for the console version, like I said before, and I'm going to get to in a moment, the actual meat of it all is the same. It's a 2D plane in which you have clumsy aim down sights gameplay, no collision physical attacks, and lackluster AI for both your crew and the enemies. Every single time a developer says revamped and reworked AI, that sends shivers down my spine, because it means the first kind was so bad that a new set of coding needs to be done, which basically means, hey, you guys, this sucked the first time. Want to bet it'll still suck the second time? And then you come traipsing in, you run over them, you line up your sights and then fire, and then suddenly everyone's like, oh shit, it is the bad guys. And from that point on, it's pretty much anarchy, because someone at Cryptic really was a fan of the game Advent Rising and its coveted flick aiming. By the way, when I say coveted, I mean universally despised, and here somehow it's even worse, because in Advent Rising, it didn't target friendlies, but here it does, flicking from enemy to friend to enemy alike with the barest of touch on the thumb pad, sending a special attack whizzing into the visored face of your Geordie clone. Thankfully, as I said, friendly fires off. With skills and buffs and specials and different weapons, it can look awesome though, as one crew member tosses a stun grenade into a Klingon speed walking group while another guns them down with a weapon from the Predator movie. Where the space combat is controlled contests of strategy and workable solutions, though, much of ground combat is just sort of random oh shit moments, somewhat bad camera angles, and then a respawn. Now, that brings us to controls. First, hats off to these guys, because for all intents and purposes, they somehow locked themselves in a room with a controller and a mouse and keyboard and came out with just the controller. Translation of almost all the skills, combat moves, abilities, and strategies are actually there, including a new system that allows you to queue up specials like gambits in that one Final Fantasy game I was the only one who seemed to like. That means you can manually set off a move, or make it go off when you enter combat sometime later, or with other variables. I like this because it allows you to take a game plan ahead of time into the battle, but it also puts you in control of almost all the same number of options PC players have if you want to dive into it. The one caveat is a radial menu is never as fast as a keyboard, but after a bit of time I wasn't really whining to go back. Now, while you're doing all this, you're following story missions as you're leveling up, sometimes doing less battle-oriented missions, but mostly doing patrols, grouping with friends, doing space raids, joining calendar events, trading items for money in the exchange, and almost everything that you would imagine in any other MMO, including a somewhat robust crafting system. One thing that straight up sucks is there's no direct compare button I could find. That means you basically blow a shield system right out of the ass of a Romulan cruiser and you want to use it, deciding if it's better than the one you currently have is actually a multi-step and not a single-step affair. In a game like this, that to me is actually a cardinal sin. I couldn't find any option to change that, or the hilariously terrible targeting system in the options, and that was too bad. All that being said, it's actually combined with a generally usable HUD, and one that, with one or two caveats, works really well with a controller. But that does bring us down to one fun fact. This is an F2P game, not a DDWM game where devs don't want money. It does have microtransactions. I've met folks who are generally of varying minds on the content here, and I would say it's pretty much right in the middle ground. STO offers an almost stunning amount of content for free. More than enough. If you did want to get something special, you're probably going to most likely have played the game enough that investing in the title and in the dev's work would make sense anyway. One question I get is, can a free-to-play person win the PvE content? Basically, complete the full story from start to finish. Yes, it's pretty countless how many of us have actually done that, and that's without the various other elements and events where the last tier ships are given out or different finds that you can run across on your way. And that's without fleet help, which is, as I said before, basically your guild in Starfleet disguise. Fun factor. You know, STO has always been a bit shit when it comes to ground combat, regardless of reworks, rejiggers, and just redos. That system has never felt like it belongs with the rest. Its animation looks different, its control feels different, and its gameplay is unilaterally worse. At the best of times, when helping out a classic Star Trek character figure out what's going wrong with a group of 6 Starfleet personnel, it can be interesting. But ultimately, its pace never has the enjoyment of the ship combat. Now that being said, Cryptic knows this, and for the most part you're talking a 75-25 split, maybe even less on that 25 end. And the 75% is really engaging. The number of systems a game has that's this mature always is going to be hard to manage, and their tutorial system is something I would expect in a mobile title, not in a massive MMO. It's just not that good. It's almost woefully incomplete in explaining the subtleties of the system, and even some of the basic aspects. Now, at the same time, there are far fewer MMOs that can have this feeling of strategy and accomplishment, and surely less so in the spaceship battling it out genre, since there are barely any anyway. So as you guys know, I normally rate games buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch again rating scale. This is basically going to be simply a check it out, which is sort of like a buy, or don't check it out, which is it's not worth it. You know, this is obviously a check it out or a buy, even though it doesn't cost any money. The amount of free content is almost stupefying, and by the time you may, if you ever, feel the crunch for something cool, it's probably going to be far past the point where the developers should have gotten a bone thrown to them anyway. In fact, STO doesn't really fall into near the number of pitfalls that I think Neverwinter does, and I was actually okay with that game, but this one just does a ton. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the review. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Maybe check out the Patreon, and certainly check out the Amazon affiliates if you ever end up buying games. That really does help the channel. Make sure to follow me on Twitter. I'm always talking on there. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.